You're scrolling through your feed, maybe sipping coffee, when the headline hits you like a slap: California coastline cracks and collapses into the ocean after 4.2 earthquake. A 4.2. That's barely enough to rattle a wine glass, so why does the coast look like it's falling off the edge of the continent? Because this wasn't just a quake, it was a trigger. And what it set off? A full-scale chain reaction of geologic, oceanic, and atmospheric chaos. Let's start with the earthquake. A 4.2 magnitude isn't breaking records, and a lot of people didn't even feel it.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
But scientists weren't fooled, because while the shaking was short-lived, what happened underneath the surface was anything but minor. California's coastline is already a patchwork of fragile layers: sandstone, shale, old seabeds, and broken rock, all sitting on fault lines and carved up by decades of erosion. That quake didn't need to break the cliffs, it just had to push them over the edge. And that's exactly what it did. It wasn't the drama of buildings toppling or freeways buckling. It was quieter, sneakier. Microcracks spread through cliff faces. Sediments deep below started loosening. Fault-weakened zones that were already teetering suddenly became unstable. Monitoring systems picked up stress shifts across the entire regional structure. In plain English, the land moved, and not in a good way. But the earthquake wasn't the climax. It was the opening act, because the moment those fractures formed, the clock started ticking. Enter the ocean. Within hours, winter swells began hammering the coast. And these waves weren't just your typical storm surge. They were jacked up, powered by deep-sea energy, shallow coastal contours, and just the wrong kind of timing. These weren't tsunami waves, but they hit like one. Over and over, the water slammed into the base of the cliffs, forcing its way into the cracks left by the quake. The pressure wasn't just physical, it was mechanical. Think of every wave as a sledgehammer, driving seawater deeper into the rock, pulling it back out, creating suction and stress, and slowly prying the coast apart from the inside. And then, because California never does settle, a monster winter storm system decided to show up. Not just rain, not just wind. We're talking full-blown atmospheric rivers, multi-day downpours, and gusts strong enough to peel back roofs. The kind of storm that soaks the soil to the point of collapse. Combine that with a freshly fractured cliff. You're looking at landslides, rockfalls, and entire chunks of coastline vanishing in real time. This is what experts call multi-hazard convergence. Three forces: tectonic shaking, oceanic erosion, and extreme weather, all hitting the same vulnerable stretch of land within the same window of time. Any one of these on its own might have been manageable. Together, they form a perfect storm of destruction. A geological pylon where every new layer of chaos amplifies the last. And here's the kicker: most of the damage doesn't even happen while everyone's still on edge. The real danger starts after the quake, after the initial waves, after the first night of storming. Days later, when alerts fade and people get comfortable, that's when the cliffs give way. In fact, studies show over 70% of fatal cliff collapses happen more than 48 hours after a seismic event, when people assume it's safe again. Emergency alerts are already in motion. Access to cliffside trails and roads is being cut off. Coastal communities are being warned. Don't go near the edge, don't underestimate the surf, and prepare for the possibility of power outages, road closures, and flooding. Because what's collapsing isn't just land, it's infrastructure. And that infrastructure was never designed for three hazards hitting at once. And yes, this has happened before. Entire roads have vanished, not because of a single quake or one huge storm, but because of the way these risks stack. A little shaking here, some rain there, and one perfectly timed wave. Suddenly, you've got asphalt hanging in midair, telephone poles swallowed up by mud, and coastal homes left dangling over open space. The problem isn't just geology. It's timing. It's the sequence. Scientists are now moving away from treating hazards as separate events. Instead, they're tracking when they align. When fault stress spikes just as a storm rolls in. When saturated soil meets rising tides. When cliff integrity drops below a critical threshold and no one notices until it's too late. This is no longer about magnitude. That 4.2 wasn't scary on paper. But in real life, it was a spark in a forest full of dry kindling. The land was already stressed. The cliffs were already eroding. The waves were already rising. The quake just tipped the balance. And now, emergency planners are being forced to throw out the old rulebooks. Because this isn't an isolated disaster. It's a systems failure. California's coastal geology has always been risky. Weak sediments, steep slopes, fractured rock. It's not built for resilience.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
And with more development hugging the shoreline than ever before, the margin for error has all but disappeared. Every inch of land is working overtime just to hold itself together. Add climate change into the mix, longer storm seasons, stronger rain events, warmer oceans, and the risk multiplies exponentially. We are also seeing a shift in how scientists evaluate danger. It's not just about where the fault line is anymore. It's about when the fault slips, and whether that timing coincides with peak storm conditions, or high tides, or critical erosion points. The term they're using is compound events. It means we have to stop thinking in silos. Earthquakes, storms, and surf aren't separate threats, they're part of the same domino effect, and those dominoes are falling. What makes this even harder is the public perception gap. A lot of people shrug off a 4.2. They don't see a cliff and think engineering hazard. They don't look at a rainy forecast and think landslide. But the science is screaming. The coast is fragile. It doesn't take a monster quake. It takes the right quake at the wrong time. Seawater is now infiltrating cracks that never used to exist. Soil is being saturated past its tipping point. Monitoring tools are detecting stress redistributions that hint at bigger shifts to come. This isn't alarmism, it's real-time data. And yet, most of the public won't see the danger until it's visual, until the cliff literally gives way on camera, or until a popular trail collapses with no warning. That's the gap scientists are trying to close. Because by the time it's obvious, it's already too late. Infrastructure vulnerability isn't new, but it's now being redefined by these layered threats. Coastal roads, cliffside neighborhoods, utility lines, none of them were designed for what's happening now. And the scary truth is, the more we build into these unstable zones, the more we reduce the system's ability to bounce back. This isn't about fear. It's about recognition. Recognition that California's coastline isn't being undone by one disaster, it's being undone by all of them, stacked in sequence, creating a level of risk that exceeds the sum of its parts. So, what happens next? Emergency teams will keep monitoring stress points. Coastal access will remain limited in high-risk areas. The public will be warned, but whether those warnings are taken seriously, that's a different story. Because the cracks are already there. And once gravity gets involved, it doesn't ask for permission. Stay safe out there. And if you're near the coast, stay back from the edge. Seriously, no photo is worth it. If this left you shocked, or if you've seen something like this happening where you live, drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to know, and hit that subscribe button for more real-time breakdowns of the chaos unfolding around us. Stay informed, stay safe, and stay tuned. Let's not sugarcoat it. What's happening along California's coast is the definition of a slow-motion catastrophe. And the scariest part, it's not just happening in one dramatic instant, it's unfolding silently, invisibly, right under our feet. The earthquake may have only lasted seconds, but the consequences are unspooling in real time. And not enough people are paying attention. Because we're used to associating danger with things we see. We expect disaster to come with sound effects, sirens, fireballs, screaming headlines. But this is quieter. A cliff looks exactly the same the day after a quake. Until it doesn't. One minute you're walking a familiar coastal trail, and the next, half the bluff is gone. No dramatic warning, no explosion, just absence. That's the problem with delayed failure. The earthquake destabilized the geology, but the collapse comes later, when no one's looking. And this isn't speculation, this is established, documented behavior. Scientists know the patterns. After a moderate quake, stress doesn't vanish. It moves, it redistributes, and cliffs that were already balancing on the edge both literally and structurally become ticking time bombs. And the timing could not be worse. Because just as the cliffs were weakened, just as sediment lost cohesion, just as new fractures opened up like hairline cracks in porcelain, the ocean started punching back. Winter swell season is in full swing, and those waves are landing with precision, targeting the most vulnerable points of the shoreline. Think about how waves interact with a broken cliff. These aren't just big splashes. They're hydraulic attacks. The force drives water into the new cracks, saturating the rock. Then the water recedes, drawing out pressure, taking material with it. It's like nature's own jackhammer. Over and over. Tidal in, tidal out. Every wave widens the damage. And while this is happening, An atmospheric river is parked above the state, dumping relentless rain into the soil. That water isn't just soaking the topsoil, it's infiltrating deep into the slope, reaching those post-quake weak zones and reducing what geologists call shear strength. In simple terms, the Earth loses its grip. Gravity starts winning. So now, the cliffs aren't just cracked, they're soaked, eroded from below, and vibrating with residual seismic stress. What could go wrong? Everything. This is where the concept of multi-hazard convergence becomes terrifying. Because each of these forces, earthquake, ocean swell, extreme rainfall, could potentially be managed on its own. But stack them together, and suddenly the coastline isn't just unstable. It's actively failing. Geologists have been warning about this scenario for years. The idea that a small quake, one that barely registers as an alert on your phone, could line up perfectly with a powerful storm system and a high surf cycle. The odds might sound slim, but when they align, the damage isn't just doubled, it's exponential. We're not talking about if sections of the coast give way. We're talking about when. And the problem is that much of the public still thinks in terms of isolated disasters. They wait for the big one, or the worst storm, or the record-breaking flood. But what's happening now isn't about breaking records. It's about precision timing. The cliff doesn't care if the storm is historic, it cares if the storm arrives right after its internal structure was fractured by tectonic movement. This is the shift in risk assessment that scientists are trying to communicate. It's not the intensity of each event, it's their overlap, their convergence. The fact that the cliff was already vulnerable from years of erosion, that the earthquake came at the worst moment, that the waves hit immediately after, that the rain arrived before the structure could restabilize. It's a cascade, not a coincidence. And if you think this is all playing out on remote stretches of wilderness, think again. Some of the most at-risk zones are developed areas, roads built into bluffs, homes perched at the edge of cliffs, power lines snaking along fragile ridgelines. All of that is now sitting on compromised land. And once failure begins in one area, it spreads. One collapse weakens support for the next. One mudslide reroutes water flow and destabilizes surrounding slopes. That's how this turns from a local issue into a regional disaster. The concept of risk migration becomes very real, very fast. What started as a tremor below the surface propagates outward, first into the bluffs, then into roads and infrastructure, and eventually into inland communities that thought they were safe simply because they weren't beachfront. And let's not forget how the infrastructure was designed. Many of these cliffside developments were built during decades when planners weren't thinking in terms of compound threats. The goal was access to ocean views, not resilience to multi-layered natural hazards. So now we have people living in areas where the land beneath them is literally collapsing in slow motion, and the only thing between them and disaster is a crumbling bluff and a storm drain. But here's where it gets frustrating. Public awareness hasn't caught up. People hear about a 4.2 quake and shrug. No dishes broke, so they assume it's over. They hear about a winter storm and think they've lived through worse. They see the surf pounding the coast and post a few dramatic videos on social media. But they don't connect the dots. They don't realize that it's not any one of these things that's dangerous, it's all of them together. That's why emergency alerts are becoming more focused on behavioral response. It's not just about issuing evacuation orders or closing roads. It's about convincing people to respect the risk. Don't walk near cliff edges after rain. Don't assume a trail is safe just because it's familiar. Don't ignore high surf warnings because the weather looks calm. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. And when the pattern looks like this, it demands attention. Because let's be real, California's coastline isn't breaking because of one bad day. It's breaking because of decades of compounded pressure. Erosion, overdevelopment, unstable geology, climate-amplified storms, all pushing the limits of what the land can take. The earthquake just happened to be the final straw in a system that was already overburdened. And the consequences are playing out in front of us. We're seeing cliffs shearing off in slow motion, utility poles leaning at unnatural angles, and cracks spidering through pavement that used to be stable. These aren't flukes. They're signs. Warning lights in the dashboard of the landscape. And if we don't start listening to those signals, the next failure won't just take out a hiking trail or a patch of bluff. It could take out entire stretches of coastline infrastructure, leaving communities cut off, power grids compromised, and emergency responders scrambling. This is a turning point not just in how we think about natural hazards, but in how we prepare for them. Because the old model, wait for the storm, then assess the damage, no longer works. We need to think in systems, in sequences, in synergies. That's what nature is doing, whether we like it or not. So yeah, the quake was only a 4.2. But don't let that number fool you. It was the push that sent a barely stable coastline into freefall. And while the damage may not be fully visible yet, the processes are already underway. Waves are still striking. Rain is still falling. Soil is still shifting. And somewhere out there, another crack is widening just a little bit more. Stay aware. Stay off unstable trails. Pay attention to emergency updates, even if they sound cautious. Because this isn't fear-mongering. It's what happens when nature lines up its forces with terrifying precision. And here's the part no one wants to hear. The systems designed to protect us. They're already stretched thin. Emergency responders are juggling overlapping crises, monitoring mudslide-prone zones, checking structural integrity of roads, rerouting traffic away from cliffside collapses, all while trying to communicate evolving risks to a population that's already tuned out after the quake passed without real damage. Because here's the brutal truth. California's coast is fragile by design. It's not just that the rock is soft, it's that the whole geological setup is practically begging to fail. Sedimentary layers tilted at steep angles, interlaced with faults, barely held together by time and weather. You add in seismic activity. It's like cutting the last thread on a fraying rope. The quake didn't need to destroy, it just had to weaken. And once weakened, all it takes is gravity and a little water, or a few more waves, or a bit more rain. And those waves, they're not calming down. The deep ocean dynamics feeding these swells don't care about your calendar or the news cycle. They're relentless. And they're smart. They find the weakest point and hit it again, and again, and again, until something finally gives. So, while people are looking for drama, the real collapse is already happening in layers. The cliff doesn't fall in one clean break. It shears, it slips, it sinks in chunks. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And every slip makes the next one more likely. This is the moment where we either take this seriously or brace for another round of how did this happen. And if history tells us anything, it's that California has a habit of learning lessons the hard way. But you don't have to wait for the road to disappear to know it's at risk. You don't have to see a home fall into the sea to realize it was built on borrowed time. You just have to look at the pattern. If you're watching this, you're not just some passive observer, you're part of the very few who are paying attention while the cracks are still forming. So let us know what you're seeing where you are. Are you noticing signs of erosion? Are local trails or roads showing damage? Drop a comment below, share this with someone who lives near the coast, and don't forget to subscribe. The ground might be shifting, but staying informed, that's solid ground. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button, it tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.